Lacrosse community, my name's Ryan Berns. I'm the founder of the Lacrosse Leadership Institute. It's our mission to empower all those that love lacrosse, to recognize the skills you gain from the sport, to ultimately live your best life possible. We're so fortunate today to be joined by head coach of Trine University, Ryan Kuhn. Ryan, thank you so much for being a part of our conversation today. And for those in our community that aren't quite aware of your story, can you share a little bit about how you got into lacrosse and where it's taking you to today?
Absolutely, man. Well, first, thank you for having me on. It's awesome. I love what you're doing. I love the ideas behind it, and have been a real fan of some of the guys that you've talked to before. It's a great platform to kind of use and help people. But for me, my lacrosse journey has been unique. It's probably not unique in terms of kind of how it started. I'm originally born and raised on Long Island, grew up kind of on the border of Nassau and Suffolk County in a small town called Copiague, which isn't necessarily really known for its lacrosse. But we're surrounded by towns that are really well known for our lacrosse. So, grew up on Long Island and kind of, in terms of, and I'll relate it to kind of just the Midwest, kind of that's where I am right now. Kind of how football, baseball, basketball, the big sports, you're kind of born into those sports. On Long Island, lacrosse is really kind of that sport that, boys and girls are really born into. It's one of the sports that, selfishly, and kind of, I feel we do really well. And I think if you kind of just look at the history of the game, you've seen quite a bit of, very talented players come off the island and, that sort of thing. And it's just been, kind of growing up, as opposed to some of the surrounding areas that were around me, Copiague really didn't have a great feeder program. So I always had a stick in my hand because my brother was a little bit older than me and he was playing. So kind of always had a stick in my hand, but didn't really start playing organized lacrosse until, kind of those middle school ages. Which, back then, and, we're not talking too far ago because I'm not that old just yet, but, it was, the club scene wasn't around really yet. So it was really kind of your town teams and your feeder programs. And, for towns like mine, we kind of got started a little bit later. But I had the great opportunity to play for a wonderful high school coach who really kind of, once I started playing, I caught the bug, man. And I think there's a lot of people probably are going to, watch this and can sympathize. Lacrosse is one of those special games, man, where once you kind of, it sinks its teeth into you, you're hooked for life. And, here I am a bunch of years later and I'm still hooked to it. And I think part of that was because of, who I played for. Coach Jim Conan has been a huge mentor to me throughout my career. As a player and playing for him, he was my boss in the summers. I lifeguarded for him. He helped me get into college and kind of continue my career there. And then, he's been with me every step of the way through my college coaching career. And even that point where I kind of took a step away from the college game and moved back to Long Island and coached at the high school level, he was the person who helped put me to where I was. And, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. After I graduated high school, went to Adelphi for 2 years, which, they were a couple years removed from their national championship. And when I was there, we were nationally ranked. And it was, at the time, one of the best programs in the country. And I really enjoyed my 2 years there. And I got the chance to play for Sandy Capitos, who is a phenomenal coach and national championship level coach, and kind of somebody who, I don't think is talked about enough. He had such a high level IQ for the game. I learned so much from him. And then after 2 years, I moved on to Manhattanville College and played for another, championship level coach of the year, and Dan Mulholland, who's, still another great mentor to me to this day. And kind of my time at the end there, I was going to school to be a teacher, wanted to be a history teacher, high school coach, thought that was the pinnacle of life, kind of always had that mapped out. And kind of towards the end of my senior year, I was like, you know what? I love college athletics. I love being in a college atmosphere, and I love the game of lacrosse. It's my passion. It's my obsession. It's, kind of I don't really have many other hobbies outside of the sport of lacrosse. at that point, I was like, I'd really like to give it a go and see if I can make a career out of this. And that kind of set me off on, my journey. I made a number of stops as an assistant, got my first head coaching job out in the Midwest, moved down and started a Division II program in Tennessee. Brought me back to Long Island and then brought me back out to the Midwest. And, kind of the whole reason we're kind of back out here is, during one of my stops, I actually met my wife, who was a volleyball player at Minnesota. She's a phenomenal lady. She's a, college professor. And we're kind of in the area where her family and where she grew up. So it's kind of come full circle. And, part of the reason I'm here today is, happy wife, happy life. And, we get our daughter we have our daughter growing up around her cousins and her grandparents, and my wife is close to her family. So, all things considered, it's a pretty good situation.
Oh my gosh, Ryan. Well, you can see how big family priority is for you, from getting to lacrosse early because of your family, and now where you guys are living and providing impact to the community. It's massive. And I think that's a big thing that we take from lacrosse. I do have to ask, who has been your most impactful coach, or who's your first coach? Can you talk a little bit about them?
My most impactful coach is, I've already mentioned it, is Jim Conan. I can't say enough about that man and what he's done for me as a person, as a player, as a coach. Without him, and, I would say that he as a person, he's really, we talk about transformational coaches. He is a transformational coach. He was a transformational coach before, that term was even thrown around. He was my soccer and my lacrosse coach. He is, I think, one of the best high school lacrosse coaches in the country, and I would put him up against anybody. All things considered, all things even, if there were two even squads and he was the coach of the other one, I would put all my money on the team that he's coached by. He was always somebody that, would give the shirt off his back to people, was always looking to help people. And he was just, the one thing I will say that, he values over everything. And one of the things that I've always loved about him is his loyalty to his people. He's a phenomenal person. Really, his X's and O's, those goes without saying, but, I think the reason, he's become, and he's been such a great coach is because of his ability to relate to players and build those relationships with players, and really kind of, allow people to believe that, they have greater abilities than what they might think of themselves. So I think one of the greatest things that he ever kind of instilled in us was that he believed in us. And, he was always a person that was there for you when you needed it. He's still a guy that I talk to, 2, 3, 4 times a week. He was the guy when I was fortunate enough to be inducted into my school's Hall of Fame. He was the guy who did my Hall of Fame induction speech. And then I got to return the favor the next year for him. He's just, I can't thank him enough, and he's been a huge part of my life, will always be a huge part of my life. And, the day I got engaged, I actually ended up at his house. So I did it on Long Island over Thanksgiving break a bunch of years ago. And, at some point during that day and all the craziness, I ended up at his house. And it was just a great experience. He's somebody that's been a huge part of my life. And, he's been a huge mentor to me.
Oh my gosh. Well, we can see the impact he's had on your life. And that's amazing to hear about the transformational leadership style he has and how he's able to affect so many. I think you mentioned being able to see ability or possibilities in others that they don't even see in themselves. And for me, that's what leadership is. It's being able to unlock that potential. What does leadership mean to you, Ryan?
That's such a loaded question. I think, great leaders and leadership is about being selfless and being there for others. You're serving others. It's not about individual ego, individual success. It's about putting yourself before others and really being an example for people, and, and doing the right thing when it's not the most popular thing. Strong leadership is one of those things where it's hard to put, the right words to it, but leadership, when it's good, it and you can see it and you can call it out. When leadership isn't good, you can call it, point it out, and look at it as well. And then somewhere in there, you're trying to form this clear, definitive definition to it. And it's just so hard. But I think it really starts with, the ability to, kind of see greater things in people than they might see themselves. And great leaders have the ability to wear different hats and be whatever it is that they need to be for that specific person, that specific team in that specific moment. And we know that success, it's not a straight line like that, it's a little wavy, and having the ability to, manage those highs and lows and kind of just keeping people on task in terms of that sort of thing, and being really resilient. I think great leaders and leadership is, having the ability to be resilient when, things, we're in one of the most unique and difficult times in world history right now. And you can see, last year specifically, at least, and it wasn't, just to college lacrosse, it was college athletics, professional athletics, business, everything. The great, you got to see some great leaderships, and the people that really thrived in these difficult times were the ones that displayed great leadership and managed these difficult times the best. Because it certainly isn't perfect. No day is ever perfect. It's just managing those things on a daily basis, and being there for people when they need you the most. And, having a grounded reality and understanding that, and having a good set of morals and, things like that. I think if, the really great leaders, they're not so focused on the wins and losses. I'm sitting here, I've got a shelf full of books right here. And one of my favorite books is The Score Takes Care of Itself. Because it really does. It's about what you do on a daily basis, from a process standpoint, and how you develop and, maintain and, continue to build those relationships with the people that, you touch on a daily basis. There's so many touch points with what we do on a daily basis. We're afforded this opportunity to make an impact on so many people. And, I think so many people, it's not just what we do within, the lacrosse program here, but, it's all the other programs, every day, you have so many different touch points. You're not just, interacting with just your lacrosse team, it's other people within your athletic department, other athletes within your athletic department. It's really kind of, and I've always been this big believer that teams take on the personality of their coaches, whether that's good or bad. So we really strive to be, a good role model for our guys, and really kind of, the big thing for us is that, and every program pretty much says the same thing, we strive to get our people from point A to point B. And we want our people to, strive to be the best version of themselves every single day. And we just strive to be 1% better than the day before. And whatever it is that you're doing, be the best at it and be the best that you can be so that you're reaching your individual ceiling.
Ryan, there's so much to unpack with that, and I absolutely love it. At the end were some big highlights, though, but it all stems with the fact that the leader's the one setting the example. And that's why I think you say the team ultimately turns into what the leader is, or their personality type. So if there's someone who has that growth mindset, they want to be 1% better every single day. They're putting their best foot forward. They have the morality or the integrity where they're going to make the tough decisions, even if they're not popular. I think ultimately that allows the constituents or the teammates to say, hey, coach is doing it, captains are doing it, the leaders are doing it. I have no reason not to do it. And I think that's where ultimately people understand they can take on a lot of work. They're not as busy as they say. It's not as hard. And ultimately, that's where we unlock that possibility and that potential, which is just massive. And we get to see huge teams. I would like you to add, Ryan, though, you talked about sometimes making decisions that are tough or unpopular. Can you share some of those decisions you've had to make as a coach or a leader?
A lot of times people always quantify that to, having to, whether or not, it always comes down to playing time, right? A lot of times that stuff comes down to it. And every coach deals with that. Sometimes, it comes down to, So for us, and where we're at, because, academics are such a high, it's like that for any college program, but since we kind of have a lot of guys that are in the engineering program here, academics, they've always been for me. I've always been a big believer, if you have it together off the field, the on the field stuff takes care of itself. So it starts in the classroom. For us, we've had to make some difficult decisions. I think and I think he would be completely okay with me telling this story, but, just one thing that I had to do was, we were on spring break, and this was a bunch of years ago, and I had a player that wasn't doing what he was supposed to do in the classroom. And, when parents trust us with their most precious cargo, which are their kids, we want them to feel like, when they drop their sons off, they made the best decision that they possibly could, because for whatever reason, and it is a true reason, as exciting and as nervous as the students are when they get dropped off for the first time in college, it's just as traumatic for the parents, because oftentimes that's the first time that they're really going to be away from each other for an extended time. So, there is a lot of that stuff that parents have to deal with. And, part of what we talk about in the recruiting process is that we're going to take care of your sons. We're going to look after them like how you would want them to be looked at. So we hold them accountable for their actions on the field, in the classroom, socially, emotionally, everything like that. But this one individual in this instance wasn't really holding up his end of the bargain in the classroom. And at that point, since then I've made some changes so that I can, we monitor it a little bit closer now. But, we had gotten some, check-ins from professors that, this person wasn't doing what they were supposed to do. So rather than let him participate in practice and participate in games over spring break, I sent him to the library, which was still open over spring break. Now, is that the most popular decision in the world? No, but at the same time, that was what that young man needed at that point in time. And I'm proud to say that he has now gone on and graduated from college. I believe towards the end, he was as close as he possibly could be, or, he had some Dean's List semesters in there. And to this day, I still talk, it's decisions like that, and it's not, that is somewhat of a lacrosse decision, but at the end of it, that's a real life decision. Going to college is it's an investment. You're investing in yourself, you're investing in your future. And we want the young people that we talk to on a daily basis and we interact with on a daily basis to really kind of understand that, this is an opportunity for you to really put yourself on a great path moving forward. So that's one instance. There's countless others, and it's just that's one that always sticks out to me, because that's one that we still laugh about to this day. I can remember where I was standing, I can remember where he was standing, and I can remember sending him off the field and sending him, because to get to the library from where we were, you actually had to drive away and go up this huge hill. So I remember that, but it wasn't necessarily the most popular thing at that time, but that's what that person needed in that moment. Because, and I always feel like, a lot of the decisions that we've made, if a parent ever called us, we could easily defend that. So, it's a process, and over time, we're never perfect. No coach is ever perfect. And I think, for us, great leaders, they adapt over time. So in kind of circling back to your first question before, because I just thought about it, we have to be able to adapt. The great leaders have adapted. I think, if you look at some of the great coaches in our game, like a Coach Danowski, Coach Danowski, I feel was, his approach to kind of everything was ahead of its time. Because with the way, kind of things have changed, and he's always been a transformational coach. He was doing it at Hofstra. And then you take him down to Duke, and, Duke is Duke, but, and then all of a sudden you start to see coaches like he and Coach Tillman and Coach Tiffany, these transformational guys. Now they're starting to have all of this success. There's a reason behind that. And I think those guys are, their approach to things, and every coach does it a little bit differently, because coaches, win at all levels, and they're different types of coaches and things like that. But, those are some guys that really stand out to me. as guys that have been really great in terms of how they've adapted to, how the game has changed.
I think that's massive because we're going to face adversity day in and day out. In my opinion, lacrosse is great because that adversity is on the field and it's not life or death. It's not as real as some adversity can be in our lives. But I think it gives us the opportunity to challenge ourselves and overcome and gain the confidence to ultimately go out into the real world and be successful. Ryan, I want to hear from you with all the experiences you have in lacrosse, with the adaptation of leadership, all these mentors that you have, outside readings. What are some of the pinnacle moments that you have that really stick out?
I mean, I really, we could talk about stuff on the field, and those are great, and I have one, but the first one I'm going to talk about is kind of, this is stuff that it involves that stuff, but I always like to and one thing that I've never done really well, and I still don't do really well, is I don't reflect on things. I'm always kind of like, we do an exercise here every year, and, our guys, we did it this fall, where it's state your name, where you're from. And it's kind of our icebreaker to introduce everybody to the team and what's your favorite animal, right? And, usually you have some really fun answers. My favorite animal is the shark, because the shark is always swimming forward. All right. And that's a little bit of a Long Island thing because I grew up on the water and everything like that. But I always like the shark because they're always moving forward and that necktie mentality and that sort of thing. In terms of kind of this summer, I really felt like it was just one of the best experiences of my life outside of getting married and seeing my daughter born. I got to go to one of my first players. So one of my first guys that I recruited, he had gotten married. He got married down in Indianapolis, and I got to go to one of my former players' weddings. It was just such a cool moment, and to kind of see that, even years removed from us being together, I still had, I was there with, him and his wife and a bunch of former players, and then, to kind of see them and hear them reflecting on our time together, and some of just, you never know until you leave. But it's just to hear some of the things that they were saying about, what our program meant to them and what they did, what that our time together meant to them. It was so special. And I remember driving home with my wife, and, this was before I had gotten the job here at Trine. So we're talking about my time here at LMU. And it was just, I had to take a step back, and I'm like, my wife always used to say, she's like, you'd come home on those bad days and you'd say like, oh, I don't know if these kids are getting it, if anything's getting through. And she like looked at me and she was like, you did make a difference in some people's lives. And I was like, it hit me, and it felt really great. And actually that same person I saw this weekend, I was down in Indianapolis recruiting, and I got a chance to spend some time with him. And it goes back to the relationship things. I still talk to guys that I coached, 10 years ago, on a weekly basis. It's just, it's amazing. So, in terms of like the pinnacle, that's, I think that's the greatest thing in the world. For me, you get a pinnacle every single year. The pinnacle for me every single year is seeing guys graduate, move on, get jobs, and build great lives for themselves. Like, that's the pinnacle for me. That's what gets me out of bed every morning. Now, if we're talking about, the wins and losses, like, yeah, like I'm saying all that stuff. I love to win. Winning is a great thing. We want to be the best team that we can be every single year. But I think as a, if we're talking about wins and losses, and we've had some great ones, I look back to our first win over a ranked team when I was at LMU, and we beat Queen's University of Charlotte, a game that no one thought we were going to win, a game that, they had kicked our butts for, a couple years prior. They came in and they thought the same thing was going to happen. We knew we had a talented team. We believed in ourselves. We believed in the game plan, and we just steamrolled them. And the next year they came back, and, it was a fluke. You guys aren't going to do it, yada, yada, yada. And then guess what? We did it again. And for us, this little team, this team, in the mountains in Tennessee, in a rural area, to kind of go and, beat this team that, was a Final Four team in Charlotte and all that other stuff. And to do that, it was a great thing. But I think one of my most pinnacle moments was, you know, in 2019 when we had the chance to, you know, we went on an epic run at Shore and Wading River High School. You know, this was the year, you know, after I'd left LMU and before I'd moved back out to the Midwest. So that Shore and Wading River team, it was, you know, a top 10 team in the country. We had, you know, I think 15 Division I commits on that team, guys that are playing to this day. You know, Under Armour All-Americans. But the thing about on Long Island is that you're playing teams with other Under Armour All-Americans. And, you know, we had to go through some pretty special teams. But, you know, for me, you know, my dream growing up, right, for a Long Island kid, you know, if you were, you know, this was a little bit before the MLL. If you were like the best of the best, you had to win at Hofstra to win a county championship, Long Island championship, anything like that. And I had always said, you know, I want to win at Hofstra. I want to win a championship at Hofstra, you know, because of growing up, I'd watched those great Ward Melville teams, those great Massapequa teams, those great Farmingdale teams. And, you know, I'd always wanted to do that. And, you know, we played the Long Island championship against Cold Spring Harbor on the turf at Hofstra, you know, almost, you know, 20 years to the day. And growing up, people were like, you know, you're from Copeg, like you're never going to do that. Like you're crazy, all of these things. And, you know, I guess, you know, I just always kind of, you know, had a feeling that something might happen like that. And, you know, thankfully, you know, we had a guy like Xavier Arline who just put the team on his back, and we came back from like a 7-goal deficit in the third quarter to win the game and, you know, go on a championship run and all that other stuff. But, you know, I think, you know, if you look at like my Twitter or anything like that, you know, I have a picture, it's me holding my daughter on the turf at Hofstra. And we have video of her running around on the turf at Hofstra. You know, that was awesome. And to do it in front of my friends and family, that was even better. You know, and then we, you know, a few days later we went on and we won the state championship, which was really cool. And funny story about that, the guy who I coached with, you know, I coached with, you know, 3 phenomenal guys, Dave Bates, Dan Luciano, and Mike Taylor, who are 3 awesome coaches. You know, Mike Taylor, he, you know, he's won at every level. He was the assistant on Dowling when they won the national championship in 12. You know, he's one of the guys that helped run Legacy Lacrosse. Like he is one of the best high school lacrosse coaches in the country. And then I got a chance to, you know, work with Dan Luciano, who is the assistant coach with me as well on that team. And Dan, funny story is that when I had gotten out of college, I had met Dan because I was coaching in a lacrosse tournament and Dan was recruiting for Suffolk Community College. We had talked and he had ended up bringing me on the staff at Suffolk Community College, which was my first, you know, assistant coaching job at the college level. And it helped get me to my next, you know, stop, you know, to kind of go full circle and win it all with the guy who helped, you know, break me into the college game. You know, I text him every day and we always talk about that. And he's like, man, it was so great. Thank you so much for helping us out. And I'm like, you have no idea how much this is all because of you and because of our conversation, you know, at Hexter State Park in the summer of 2003. You know, it's just a wild time, man. It's funny how everything comes full circle, but, you know, it's been a great ride, man. I'm very fortunate. I'm very thankful. You know, and once again, I'm not at that shore. I'm not with Shore and Wading River that year if it wasn't for a guy like Jim Conan, if it wasn't for Jim Conan. So, you know, a lot of my success, and I think every coach would feel the same way, it's all about getting opportunities. And, you know, most of our opportunities are, you know, because of somebody else. They help get us to a specific point. So, yeah, it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat.
Ryan, amazing. I mean, to know that most of your pinnacles are spawned with a more internal and humanistic side of things is amazing. I think that's why I started this podcast in the first place, was just the effect and human interaction that we have. But then to also see that on the field, you had a dream turn into reality, which is what we all strive for as well. As little kids, we dream of those opportunities, and for you to work, and it finally pays off, even though you probably never even expected it to.
No, you know, it's crazy. And I mean, also too, you know, I've had a lot of tremendous support from my wife. My wife is phenomenal. And, you know, she's a volleyball player by nature. She played at Minnesota, and she's the best athlete and the best coach in our family. You know, and to kind of have her support through all this, because, you know, we do spend a lot of time away from each other, and it's, you know, it can often be a thankless job. but she's a part of the family here, and we've always involved them. I've always involved my wife and daughter in any program that I've been in, and it's just without her, she's kind of she's the straw stirring the drink. I always make the joke, the only time I ever get to make decisions is when I'm with the team and I'm on campus at Trine, and then everywhere else I always kind of defer to her, because she's the brains of the operation. If she knew how to run an offense and and a defense, and she could probably figure it out, I'd probably defer to her on some of that stuff too.
It's great to have the familial support, and I think that's what lives we want to live, is something that's well-rounded professionally, personally, family-wise, physically. There's so much that goes into it. Ryan, we're wrapping up on time, but are there any last thoughts you have on lacrosse or leadership that you can share with us?
All I'll say is lacrosse is a great game. If you love it, it'll love you back. And, there's a lot of great people in this game, and, there's a lot of great opportunities to play out there and get better on a daily basis. So, with obviously with things like this and, opportunities to kind of talk to people like you, lacrosse is in a great spot, and it's only getting better. So I can't thank you enough for having me, man. It's been awesome getting a chance to talk to you.
Ryan, thank you so much. We appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Awesome, man. Same to you.